So it's been a little while since I sold off the Canon C70, and some of you may know that I picked up the RED Komodo X as an upgrade from the C70. This camera's been so fun to work with, and honestly it fits my needs really well, and today I want to share with you guys all the reasons why I bought the RED Komodo X instead of something else in a market full of incredible cameras. So before we get into all the different reasons why I bought the RED Komodo X, I wanted to share with you guys what exactly I was looking for in an upgrade from the Canon C70. And over the last year of working at the Canon C70, my preferences and ideas have definitely changed in what I was looking for in a workhorse cinema camera. So I took a step back, looked at what I was doing, all the different jobs I was usually having come through my door. I was doing weddings, events, social media gigs, small to medium-sized campaigns, stock footage, travel, YouTube, and pretty much everything else in between all of that. And then I also took a look at my camera package. I had the C70 and Sony FX3, but I knew I wanted to swap out the C70 because I just wanted a different change. I made a video talking about why I sold off the Canon C70, so I'll leave that link down below for more context. And I knew I was going to sell the C70 and I was going to keep the FX3. So knowing that I had a baller, hybrid, tiny mirrorless cinema camera, I knew I didn't want to go down that direction, and I wanted a C70 but supercharged and something that was definitely a couple tiers above it. So over the course of researching my next cinema camera, I developed this checklist that whatever camera I upgraded to, I had to tick all those off. I didn't want to go into a new system based off of hype or like specs or a YouTube video. I wanted to actually make sure what I was investing was going to be proper for my needs, my preferences, and just make life easier, because I do a lot of different types of jobs and variety and versatility is definitely number one, and I don't want to take this decision lightly. So I definitely wanted 6K. I wanted a modular and minimal approach to the workflow of the camera. Since I do a lot of different things, I want my camera to be really nice when it's stripped down on a gimbal, on a tripod, easy rig, cine saddle, fully rigged up for full productions. When I'm by myself as a solo operator, it needs to fit a wide variety of jobs because that's what I do. I also wanted tons of different cinema functions like shutter angle, SDI, false color, EI zone. A gyroscope could be cool for stabilization in post. I definitely wanted a fast sensor readout, something like my FX3 or faster, or better yet, a global shutter. I also wanted a wide variety of standard codecs, so any kind of flavor of ProRes. I definitely wanted internal RAW. I loved internal RAW on the C70, and I don't want to mess with external recorders. I also wanted V-mount or gold mount support. Ideally, a built-in V-mount plate because I have tons of V-mount batteries. They just last longer, they charge quicker, and they're just nicer to use, and you could power a bunch of different accessories off of those ports. And I also wanted a household name like Canon, Sony, Arri, or RED. Those are like the main kind of camera companies in my local market, and also the main camera companies in like the general market. So I didn't want to go down a different path of like some random company. I want to make sure I get something that works well with my local market. And when looking at the camera market and all the different cameras I was researching, the KX stood out time and time again across the board, from the workflow, the versatility of it, the image quality, the features, the functions, the name. It definitely had the best balance of all of that, and it fit well in my budget, which was 10 to 20K. And for that price range, there's not really a camera that can do everything the Komodo X can. And if you want everything the Komodo X can, you have to go up above into like the 20K range, like the Brano or Raptor or above. But yeah, there's so many good cameras on the market, and different cameras lend better towards different styles. And when looking at the projects that I do, my preferences, what exactly I was looking for in the next cinema camera, the Komodo X took the cake, and I ended up pulling the trigger on it. So reason number one is that I wanted a small, modular, and versatile camera. I adore my Sony FX3 because it packs a punch in this tiny little housing, and I could take it anywhere. Hiking, traveling, doing YouTube stuff. I could rig it up, strip it down. It's just a very well-rounded camera that fits my style really well because there's lots of different jobs that require different setups. My C70 was good. It was small for what it was, like compared to like a C500 or FX9 or something, but it's still kind of big for a cinema camera. I wish it was bigger like the C500 or C300 because it'd be nicer to work with, or if it was smaller like the R5C, or better yet, the Komodo X. The Komodo X is so tiny. I think it's a 4x4x5 cube. It's a little bit bigger than my FX3 and quite a bit smaller than my C70. I don't know about you, but for me, I value having a camera that could strip down quickly, is super small, and I could throw it in a backpack and have this really nice nice and smooth workflow when out traveling, because I find myself by myself oftentimes, or living out of a backpack, or I guess working out of a backpack rather. And the C70 took up a lot of space. The FX6 would take up a lot of space, and anything bigger than that would just be too big for the jobs that I'm doing right now. I know if you're working on a set or like a bigger location, or if you have a bigger crew, of course you can get by with an Alexa or Venice or something, but for my needs, I really need something small and minimal and versatile. And that size really plays a big factor for me, because I could throw it in a 25 liter or 50 liter backpack and know that I could bring everything I need to get the job done and have no wasted space. But it's just absolutely insane seeing how small this Komodo X is. I knew it was small to begin with, but when I unboxed it, I just couldn't believe how tiny it is, because it really is a little bit bigger than my Sony FX3, which is just such a huge bonus for me. But yeah, because I do so many different jobs, the Komodo X can really be comfortable in a lot of different ways. You can just run it with the V-mount off the back and a lens and just use the top LCD and pull focus, and that honestly works pretty fine. You can use your phone to monitor, you can use external monitors. All the different accessories are really quick and easy to work with, and it doesn't really require much to get it going. And I know a lot of YouTubers say that if you buy a RED, you have to spend so much money to get it up and running. That's not really true. Like, it just depends on what you need, but if you run a minimal and like intentional workflow, you can get by with a top handle, lens, battery, media, and you're good to go. Yeah, this Komodo X is gonna be perfect. Handheld, stripped down, on a gimbal, maybe on a car rig or whatever those like black arms are. Easy rig, cine saddle, literally everything. Like, this camera being a cube form factor, but being so robust, like, it's already been so versatile for my needs so far, and I know it's just gonna crush it later on with all the different types of jobs I throw at it. Reason number two is that I wanted minimal cables, and this definitely is a personal preference kind of thing, and I definitely got tired of it with the Canon C70. I primarily had it rigged up with a V-mount, which means I needed a V-mount plate, base plates, and rods to get all that attached. I had a top handle with an external monitor, which means I need to power the monitor and send HDMI out the side to that. And it just got to be a really clunky workflow, and it worked for what I needed it to be, because the C70 was cheap. I had a lot of different types of jobs where I needed it stripped down in a hybrid setup and fully rigged. So I got the job done for sure, but over time I let my FX3 kind of get more of that work to where I didn't need that like run and gun versatility of the C70. So I primarily ran the C70 fully rigged up like 95% of the time, which definitely got annoying because I really want like a cableless setup. I just got so tired of always having cables and like doing the cable management. It made my setup and rigging of the camera take a lot longer. And I know you can't avoid cables, but for a lot of my solo things where I don't have a first AC, I'm not doing a wireless video, I want to have it as bare bones and minimal as possible. And the RED Komodo X does exactly that. When looking at the Komodo X and the C70, when they have the same kind of features and functions, the RED Komodo X has practically zero cables compared to the C70's 2 or 3 cables. I can have a 7-inch monitor, a V-mount off the back, a lens, and it looks vastly cleaner than what the C70 could have ever done. And the C70, like, it works, but like when I'm running around like in the mountains and throwing my camera in my car, I was always worried about that HDMI off the side. Just didn't really like that whole setup there. And with the Komodo X, it's so nice having that built-in V-mount plate on the camera, so I don't need rods and a base plate and a V-mount plate to get my V-mount battery on the camera. And I don't have to run a cable from the battery or the plate to the camera. It's super streamlined, and all this is thanks to, of course, that V-mount plate, but also the RED DSMC3 monitor, which puts this little base thing on top of the camera and has a small USB-C cable going into the monitor. That's called the RED RMI cable, and it practically gives us a cableless setup, and everything's all powered through it. It's super easy. You turn on the camera, everything turns on. There's no more worrying about SDI protocol, which is huge for those jobs where I'm by myself. It would have been a bummer moving from the C70 to the Komodo OG or something similar where I had to run power, camera control, and an SDI or HDMI cable, and then now I'm back to square one, but with like a different form factor. Yeah, I don't have to worry about SDI protocol unless I'm doing wireless video, which is still a cleaner setup than my C70 with wireless video, and having camera control built into the monitor is so lovely. I control my camera pretty much like 90% of the time through that monitor. But yeah, that combo with the V-Lock plate, the RED monitor, and just the build, like everything just works so well, and it's been an absolute dream because I love those old RED DSMC2 cameras that basically had a 0 cable setup, and this is as close as we'll get in today's market, and I really can't ask for more. So moving on to reason number 3 is the image quality, and this should come to no surprise to a lot of you because RED is notoriously known for having incredible image quality, and the Komodo X definitely falls in line with that. The Komodo X has a 19.9 megapixel 6K global shutter sensor, and it is drop dead gorgeous. And there's a lot of different things at play with the RED image quality. It definitely falls more in line with like the RED Raptor image, which I personally prefer. It just feels like more premium than the OG. And RED claims that there's more dynamic range and color detail in the shadows, which I've found to be true. I think I've never really compared them side by side, but just from the experience I've had with both cameras, I much prefer the image from the Komodo X. But yeah, the image is drop dead gorgeous. There's tons of dynamic range. The highlight roll off is really smooth, and the image just feels very commercial and movie-like, and it just feels leagues ahead of my FX3 and C70, which those two cameras are no slouches. They have a beautiful image as well, but the Komodo X just is on a whole different level when it comes to image quality. With this camera, we get two really solid sets of codecs. We get R3D and ProRes. So R3D, we get HQ, MQ, LQ, and ELQ. Having that whole spectrum is very nice just depending on the job that I'm shooting, and ELQ is like my go-to for a lot of my smaller gigs. But with ProRes, we get a lot of really cool flavors. We get Quad 4 XQ, regular Quad 4, 422 HQ, normal, and LT, and it's really nice having all of those in case you need to deliver a proper ProRes, but I guess you can always shoot 6K R3D and then just like encode it through Resolve or Media Encoder and then kick out ProRes. But yeah, R3D is the real deal, and pairing that with the 6K sensor on the Komodo just makes for a very lovely workflow from production to post. Having 6K is really nice for delivering to 4K and 1080 because you have so much room to work with, and it's especially very nice for shooting for 9x16 because sometimes you shoot vertically but then need a crop for horizontal. It's happened before, and on a 4K sensor it just gets a little too soft. But then having 6K means we can have more room for cropping and still maintain proper detail. I can go on and on about how amazing it is to have a 6K sensor paired with R3D, but if you haven't worked with it before, you could download some footage from RED, or I could leave some in the description for you to play around with. There's so much latitude. It just grades so much better than my Canon and Sony files. It's the closest thing I've gotten to an Alexa-like experience, and for like an eighth of the price. Like, it's just absolutely insane that we have this at our fingertips. But yeah, I don't mind that this isn't a full frame sensor. I would love a full frame sensor at some point, whether that's the Burano, RED Raptor, or an Alexa Mini. But I honestly prefer Super 35 for a lot of things because it opens the door to a lot of lens options. And I know you can crop in on full frame sensors, but having it native to the camera, it's just really nice sometimes. But yeah, on top of that, the R3D codec runs extremely well on my computer. I'm running an M1 Max MacBook Pro. R3D is super familiar for a lot of productions and agencies, so you can toss your footage to them knowing that they're gonna be completely fine with it and that they've most likely worked with R3D before. Everything just feels so premium. It's insane like how good this image looks. And I knew it was gonna look really good when I bought it, but after shooting with it, like, my stuff has never looked better. And like the C70 and FX3 are really good, but man, like, I don't want to shoot on anything else after shooting on this Komodo X, and like, I'm definitely spoiled, and it's made me like bring my Komodo X around more for certain jobs that I probably wouldn't bring the Komodo in the first place. Reason number 4 is the global shutter, and this definitely goes in line with the image quality because the global shutter does play a huge part in the look and feel of your footage. The global shutter is extremely unique, and there's not too many cameras on the market that have a global shutter. Normal cameras that have a rolling shutter like read the pixels in lines like this, hence rolling. It's rolling through the lines, and if you have fast moving subjects or if the camera's moving, straight lines can start getting a little warpy, and you could definitely notice it on specific cameras that have a really slow readout. And a slow readout's fine for a lot of scenarios, but if you're shooting handheld or any action sports or just general kind of like decently fast movement, you'll find yourself getting a lot of issues having those artifacts. But the global shutter, all those issues are by the wayside because the global shutter exposes the entire usable sensor at the same exact time. So you could be moving your camera around, there's fast movement, and you won't get those weird jello artifacts out of it, which makes your motion just feel like a movie. Like, it's insane. Like, after shooting handheld on my FX3 and C70, everything feels different out of this camera, and I don't know why. Maybe it's the way that the sensor reads out or the colors or what. I think it has to do a lot with the global shutter, but I don't know, it feels different. I shoot a lot of handheld, and sometimes there's VFX on the back end from like agencies that I drop the footage to. And having a global shutter makes everything all wrapped up extremely nice and polished throughout the entire workflow. That global shutter paired with the 6K sensor means I could stabilize my footage in post and have tons of room to crop, but with a global shutter, there's no artifacts that make it harder for the computer to read. Whereas with my FX3 or the C70, when I would stabilize it, whenever there were those weird jello artifacts, it would trip the computer out and the stabilization would just go like and get completely ruined. And I saw this to be true on the first job that I shot with the Komodo X. I had a couple shots that were super shaky. I was running my Contax Zeiss vintage lenses, so those are pretty small lenses. There wasn't a lot of weight on this camera, and I clicked stabilize. It cropped in a tiny bit, and it straight up looked like I was shooting on an easy rig. And there was no jello artifacts from the stabilization, like warping it all weird. It was dead perfect, and it completely blew my mind because I never really thought of that combination as a possibility up until now. And I wish I had this combo years ago, because that would have made a lot of my projects a lot nicer. And there are certain shots where I wish I was able to stabilize it, but I couldn't because of those artifacts. So I wasn't expecting to love the global shutter, but it's starting to become like a non-negotiable at this point, which is scary because there's not many other global shutter cameras on the market currently besides, I guess, the RED Raptor X and the Sony A1. I think the new A1 has that. But yeah, overall, the global shutter has been super lovely. It's made me want to shoot surf and other action sports because shooting all those on a global shutter just opens up for a lot of really cool things. Reason number 5, the creature comforts. And by creature comforts, I mean just all of like the workflow settings and cinema functions and the tools and guides, literally everything that the RED Komodo X allows you to do. And it allows you to do a lot, from all the different assignable buttons on the camera. We have 2 record buttons that are dual pressing, so you could half press them and have that as like a little shortcut button. We also have tons of different ports off the side, and they're in a really lovely spot. I hated the HDMI on the C70, how it stuck out from the side. Even on my FX3, it does the same thing, and I hate it so much. But on the Komodo, all the ports are off the back, they're to the side, they're not in the way of your arms as you're cradling the camera, and it feels just really intuitive and neat and tidy. We also have a built-in fan, which is a non-negotiable for all of my cinema cameras, just because I don't want things to overheat. And the funny thing about this camera is that when you look at the fan, you can look directly through the camera, which hopefully means that it's like somewhat weather sealed or weather protected from like moisture and dust and sand. So hopefully that's the case. I'm always worried about my cameras when I'm out in those environments, but I've had no issues so far. We also get solid audio preamps, which is a huge bonus because I love running audio directly into camera, whether that's for interviews or like doing ambient audio with a shotgun microphone. I do that all the time for run and gun documentary style things, and being able to have usable audio on camera is nice to have. Alongside that, we get up to 80 frames, full sensor readout, which is nice to have that overhead ceiling. I never really shoot above 40 frames or 60 frames, but if a client wants like more than that, it's nice to be able to give it to them. We of course have timecode support, which is a must-have for doing multi-camera stuff or syncing audio. And then we also get a locking RF mount, which is really nice because there's opportunity for wiggles, which is huge for pulling focus, whether you're doing it by your hand or if you have a manual wheel or a wireless, like automatic wheel. It's mostly ideal for heavier lenses, but I guess it's better safe than sorry with smaller lenses as well. And it's just really sturdy. I know I'll have peace of mind when I run heavier lenses. I'll still run a lens support, of course, but with my Fujinon lens, it's quite a bit longer than like your average lens. And on the C70 or OG Komodo, I'd for sure run a lens support. But because this camera has a lock-in RF mount, I don't have to, which makes my kit way more minimal, way more light, and I don't need to bring that many parts to support this lens, which just makes it overall a lot nicer to work with. But yeah, I'm really glad this camera has an RF mount. I would have been fine with E, L, Z, RF, and any other mirrorless mount that's on the market, because those short flange distances means that you can adapt a wide variety of lenses instead of only having a PL mount or EF mount. You're pretty limited when it comes to that. So I love adapting PL lenses to these cameras. I adapt my EF vintage lenses. I can run native RF lenses like the Fujinon or the Canon ones. There's a lot of opportunities, and it just makes it a lot nicer because I'm not locked into like one select group of lenses that could be potentially outdated or way too heavy for a lot of my workflows. And then one of my favorite things about this camera is that it has newer media, which is CF Express Type B. I 100% didn't want SD cards because they're kind of expensive and they're definitely fragile and really slow, but I didn't care what media it was. I just wanted it to be newer, like either Type A or Type B CF Express. I didn't want an SSD. I didn't want to fuss around with that. And I'm glad that we have Type B in this because it's it's cheap. I can get a terabyte for $300 or $400, whereas with my SD cards that are 256 gig V90, it's like $500 for 500 gigs. But yeah, it's so nice to have this newer type of media. It feels robust. I have 3 terabytes of footage for basically $1,000. It's insane. But the only bummer is that there's no dual card slots, which would be nice, but I have to move up to the Raptor to get that, I believe. We of course get access to the DSM-C3 monitor, which the OG Komodo does not have, and that monitor opens up so much in terms of workflow and just ease of use with rigging and just the overall usability of the camera. We have expansion modules like the RED Pro IO, and we get 2-pin LEMO and timecode and all these different things. And of course we get the RED accessories with the run stops. RED always has the coolest accessories when it comes to their cameras, like the little outrigger handle or the RED top handle or the wing grips. They're just really fun and really ergonomic, and it's nice not having to use third-party accessories like Tilta or Small Rig or Condor Blue or something. Everything RED makes is designed really well. It's machined sturdy. It feels great in hand, and everything just feels so premium, and it's like a nice little bonus. Like, it feels great operating this camera because everything is so well made. But alongside that, we have tons of different cinema features like false color, peaking modes, geoscope, histogram, zebras, shutter angle. There's frame guides, image overlaying. There's a little leveler in there, anamorphic support, RED camera control, Wi-Fi, live streaming, and we also get a gyroscope, which I didn't even realize this camera had it until like a few weeks ago. Apparently there's a gyroscope in this camera that somehow you could remap it and calibrate it to your lenses and then throw it into gyroflow or something, and it stabilizes your camera based off of like the gyroscopic data. So it's way better than stabilizing through your NLE, and it's way better than a gimbal, I guess, but it crops in quite a bit. I haven't really used it, but it's there, and it's crazy that we have it instead of having to like put an actual gyroscope on the camera. But yeah, that's a mouthful. There's so many features in this camera, and the most notable being the RED traffic lights. And I'll make a video on itself talking about how I expose R3D in this camera, and the traffic lights are so intuitive and so nice to work with, and it's just made operating this camera a breeze and just extremely easy to get a nice image. Yeah, it's just a really well-rounded package. It feels like a proper cinema camera. There's really no shortcuts in it besides maybe no internal ND, but it hasn't been an issue so far. And yeah, it has all the tools that I could ever dream of, and it's just really nice that we have all those. And then the last reason number 6, is the RED name value. Like I said before at the beginning of this video, I knew that I wanted Canon, RED, Sony, or ARRI because those are all household names, but most notably, my entire market around me is shooting on RED, Sony, or ARRI. So like, I knew Canon wasn't really in the conversation because like no one around me is shooting Canon. I had the C70 for a year. No one hired me out for that camera, whereas with my FX3, I was getting hired out all the time because there's tons of FX3 productions, and having a camera that could fit in seamlessly makes you a really good target as a contract hire. If I would have completely left Sony and went fully into Canon, I would have pulled myself from all these different markets that I was open to being an owner operator. And a lot of jobs out there require you to own your own gear and operate it, and then they expect you to bring it. Sometimes they'll pay you for it, sometimes they won't. It's just kind of hit or miss depending on the job. So knowing all that, I knew I had to have a household name, and looking at all the other specs that I was looking for and the workflows and all that, Sony didn't have anything in my price range and what I was looking for, and ARRI doesn't have that. And the Komodo X hits smack dab right in the middle, exactly what I was looking for, everything I wanted. And it's so nice now having a RED and a Sony because those are two really popular cameras, and I'm now open to both markets. But of course, if you're solo all the time, or if you run your own production company, by all means go all Blackmagic or Canon or Lumix or Nikon or whatever, but that's not my reality. I get hired out all the time for other productions through different agencies or through different people, and I need to match up my footage to their workflow. But alongside that, there is this prestigious image that comes with owning and operating a RED. I want to represent myself really well. I want to be taken seriously and professional, and that's just one small piece of the equation. It's not the whole equation. It's not like I'm showing up with a RED, pay me all this money, and I'm going to deliver a crap product. I still got to make sure I'm dialed. I got to expose properly, light properly, have good movement, good framing. I got to make sure I'm dialed from head to toe. But having those like extra things outside of image making really adds a lot of value. And I think showing up with a camera that has the RED logo all over it will hopefully give the client peace of mind or make them excited knowing that, oh, we have a RED on set. We know we're getting that gorgeous RED image with the R3D codec. Our editors are going to be stoked. Same with our colorists. Or they just know overall like, oh, like this thing's going to crush it. So it's a really interesting thing seeing how people interpret that RED name. All my buddies that know nothing about the film industry were psyched that I bought a RED because they associated RED with high image quality, movies, commercials, and all that. And they're like, oh, you freaking made it. You bought a RED. which is far from the truth. Like for us filmmakers, we're like, we want an Alexa Mini LF. Like, what are you talking about making it? Like, that's a $10,000 camera that I'm working with. I want a $100,000 camera. I want all this from Arri. And that's the same thing with Arri. Like, I'm sure if I showed up to these sets with an Arri, like my clients would be beyond stoked knowing that we have this like really crazy camera on set. But that's way overkill for me. The Komodo X does exactly what I need, and it's just a huge bonus having that RED name associated with it, especially for those jobs where I pass off the footage to either the in-house editors or other agencies. Having that R3D codec that is super universal and well known, it just makes my life as a DP a lot easier because I could pass off that footage knowing that they're gonna have an easy time working with it and not blame me for random things that may happen in their workflow. And then alongside that, there is the camera rental side of things, and with my C70, no one really knew what it was. It wasn't sought after. People wanted to rent Komodos and Raptors and everything else kind of above that. So now owning and operating the Komodo X means that I now have a camera that's in that conversation of being rentable, and I can also charge more. My C70 was like 200 something a day. This is now like 300 to 500 a day, and now it's going towards me instead of going towards someone else. And the cool thing is that I can now pitch to my clients saying, hey, let's rent out my package because I have all the accessories that I know I need to get the job done. Whereas before, when I've rented cameras, they forget things all the time, whether it's like there's no side handle or no cables, or they forget an EF adapter, which happened before. It's a nightmare sometimes dealing with rental companies and people through ShareGrid. So it's nice having my own camera that's sought after. Definitely a stepping stone into thinking about buying an Alexa or a Raptor at some point. I don't need it now because I'm not renting those, but if that ever became a reality, I wouldn't be hesitant buying those cameras because I would know I'd be able to rent those out and take that kit fee every day, pay it off, and then have passive income once it's all paid off. But yeah, I definitely wanted to open myself up to those RED productions. There's tons of productions happening around that are RED only, and I met a guy in Huntington that said to me, I'm so glad that I know that you're here and you're a Komodo X owner operator because I only hire RED owner ops. And that was pretty crazy to hear because I knew that was kind of a reality, but it was crazy to actually hear it in person. Yeah, now I'm opened up to Sony and RED, and those are really popular in my area, and hopefully I can start working with Arri soon and open myself up to there as well. But yeah, as much fun and cool as this camera is, there was definitely like a business-sided mindset when picking up this camera. I wanted to make sure it did everything I wanted on the spec side, image quality-wise, but then also like on the back end, dealing with clients and renting it out and having a camera that can like add a bit more to like my business as a whole. Yeah, now that I'm an owner-operator, it means I could bring this camera on any job, even those smaller jobs that normally wouldn't have a RED camera on set because they either don't have the budget for it or they just haven't worked with those people yet. I'm now able to get that image quality to them and bless them with that, and it's really cool seeing them stoked to see that camera on set and then also the final deliverables. I'm not a stickler when it comes to it. Like, I'm not gonna withhold that camera because they're not gonna pay my kit fee. It's like I want to have the best workflow, I want to have the best image quality, and like have the best look on my portfolio. So of course I'm gonna bring my Komodo. I love shooting on that. And it's just really fun owning and operating it now because I could bring it anywhere. I can even bring it on vacation and like get some sick stock footage, which I'm gonna do at some point. But yeah, overall this camera has been so lovely to work with. It's been exactly what I've been looking for. I can't ask for more, and I'm so glad I pulled the trigger on it, even though it was so scary spending all that money on it. But yeah, it's just opened up so many doors. It's changed my perspective on a cinema camera, and as an owner-operator who's solo most of the times, it just works so well, and it's such a neat and tidy little package that makes me smile every time I work with it. I just love shooting with it. I love editing it and coloring it. It's such an incredible camera, and if you're really interested in it, I highly recommend renting it, checking it out, and actually seeing if it makes sense for your business and your workflow, and of course your budget. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about this camera or anything else or the other cameras I researched, feel free to leave those down below in the comments. And yeah, stay tuned for more Komodo X videos. I have a bunch more on the way. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.